That, boys, the playoffs were upon us. It was a pretty exciting week. One matchup did come down to the wire. One was done pretty quick. You're also going to notice the change of scenery and in volume. You got hopefully a loud whisper coming through. I hope it's as loud as possible. I do have the microphone close, but I'm at my parents' place in Cambridge here, so we'll see how that rolls down. Anyway, I'm skipping the NFL talk. Like I said, we're trying to make it a little bit more compact, going straight to the fantasy matchups, save all that other stuff for after. So we only had 2 actual matchups. Everything else was on a bye, so we'll talk about our quarterfinals, and then we will move on to projecting forward to all of our matchups for next week. In the first of our 2 semifinals, I'm really sorry, Will. This is just one of those weeks that it didn't really matter what you were up to. Now, technically, you didn't go off. You did exceed predicted. Hurts did a fine performance, one that I'm sure you were happy with. Higgins, great. You did have some disappointment in some of your middle guys, the running backs, tight end, your flex, obviously. But your defense was your defense 2, the defense 2. It was your only one in the top 5. If you look at the bench, you did have a bit more love here. You could have put in super bold move not to go with your number 1 overall pick, but I don't blame you based on the way things have gone. Either one of your running backs probably would have been better, both Najee and you ended up being a flex choice. But let's be honest, you just were up against a juggernaut on this one. Now, I'm not saying I am the juggernaut. I'm saying my team just showed up crazy. I had the tight end 1. And remember, folks, that was picked up off the waiver wire only a few weeks ago after everyone gave up on him there. I've just jinxed myself. He'll go 0 like he did at the start of the year. So I've just essentially cemented my loss. I had the running backs 1 and 2 in Connor and Cook. And I had the defense 1 in Denver, the only defense that was better than V's. So realistically, even the fact that my wide receivers underperformed, it didn't really matter. This was definitely, I think, if I could look up my high score of the year. So what a time to have it. I might need it again next week, but we'll focus on that when we look forward. V, sorry, buddy, 115 sometimes does get you the win in this league, but wasn't just going to cut it in the quarterfinals. In a much, much more even balanced matchup, we can say it was Horst against Ben, but it was really, Jefferson and Jacobs and Josh Allen against Ben. Now, Josh Allen did not disappoint for you, Horst. I know you were hoping for this year. It's the title you're still chasing. You had times when you probably thought you had it, but this matchup did come down to a few key points and injuries, Monty being a massive one. If he has a week like he normally does, 10 is usually a soft week for him, so it is not below expectation to assume that had he not gotten hurt, this would have been a different matchup. Now, just looking across the table, though, it's not like Ben didn't show up. He certainly did. He had the kicker 1, he had a defense that he didn't quite play on the team, or one that he's picked up since, so we're not going to count that because that's a defense for next week that he jumped into. He did have the tight end 3, and he had the running back 4 on the week. Brown had a massive, massive week, and CeeDee Lamb was just outside of the top 5. I think he was our wide receiver 6 on the week. So he definitely put up more than what he needed. 125 plus is usually a sign for success here. Horst, you could in most cases have gotten away with a 123, but again, like I said before, sometimes the quarterfinals just have to be decided on a few big matchups. Ben, you probably want to re-examine your wide receiver group, although looks like that might be the strength moving in. Whether you end up with 3 running backs this week, I guess only time can tell. But speaking of which, let's move ahead to look forward to our semifinals and our other matchups for the week. Waylon and Chaz only off by a couple games, but that's the theme of our year, that the parity was such that realistically, I don't think the seeds matter here. It might come down to who cares a little bit more, and obviously who shows up. Chaz, you've had a year of up and downs, and even last week when you had the bye, Cooper Kupp getting a 0 would have killed you in most matchups because you are dependent on your wide receivers coming out a bit more solid than that. So I think that's going to be a key point. Does he bounce back, and is that something you can count on? Waylon, I think you were a bit more consistent and obviously just missing out on the playoffs. Now you have that choice. Do you want to roll over and just quit? Or do you want to show that you're the other team that's going to win their last 2 to finish off the year and take down the consolation? Your wide receivers will have a huge say on that. Evans, Brown, Thomas was a massive wide receiver last week. He would have been in the top 5 if your points would have counted. You also have some options here on the bench, both in the kicking variety and mainly your receivers, although maybe your running backs, maybe you make a move, or Javonte might outseed Etienne depending on health matchups, although I doubt it. I think this is the roster you're probably going to go with. So Yahoo has it as a coin toss, and I got to say, I agree. In the battle of the former middle school math department, although I know technically you didn't always quite align, we're going to have a battle here to see who's fighting for the toilet and who's fighting for consolation. This one, Yahoo has a little bit more as a favorite. They really don't like your squad B, and I think part of it just has to do with some of the depth. You've got a couple receivers here who are boom bust, so if they boom, you'll take this one down handily. If you get the touchdown king over there, if he can go back to his run, you're looking pretty good. If not, there might be too many horses on the other side here. We do have Lamar, we do have Barkley, and to an extent Taylor. I think that would be the huge factor. So one, battle of consistency, one, big swingers, but we've seen crazier things happen. Let's see how it rolls. You can call it the battle of the shoulda-beens, as both these teams look like they could make runs at different points of the year. You could call it the battle of the quarterbacks. We do have two monster quarterbacks. I wouldn't say it's our 1-2, but it's certainly two quarterbacks that I expect to see in our top 5 for the year, with our MVP likely being Josh Allen, both on and off the field. I say on the field as an actual MVP, and off the field, I'm assuming like could end up being a fantasy MVP. I think Justin Jefferson as well might have a lot to say with that. A lot of wide receiver depth. The running backs, I'm really interested in this matchup because it's some people who are underappreciated or were overhyped at different points. So let's see how that breaks down. And I am really, really curious. I'm going to get to this a bit more in the semifinals, but maybe some teams who need it versus some teams who don't. I think your matchups are fairly stable, although it wouldn't shock me if there's some last minute movement. And obviously, Horst, you do get hurt with Monty being out for not just part of last week. At least you know going into this matchup he's out because he's out for the rest of the year. So you can plan accordingly. Again, I think anything under 55% for Yahoo is effectively a coin toss. And again, I got to agree, this one's going to come down to the last couple matchups. In our semifinal breakdown, we'll start with our overall number 1, even though the records are the same because we're just going to see that all the way through, obviously. We'll talk about that when we get to the next one. I think the biggest thing for Jake, now Yahoo has you down pretty big here, so we got to assume that you are the favorite from the season, but you really don't end up being the favorite for this particular week. I got to think the Cincinnati-Cleveland matchup has something to do with that, and the fact that Ben's receivers have been going off recently. He also has kind of undervalued running backs. Rico's been randomly important for the last couple of weeks as the Cowboys kind of just care about keeping things close and running their system regardless of the score. That could be helpful. But I got to think the biggest matchup here is the Houston-Kansas City piece. You've got Mahomes, you've got the defense, you've got the running back here. So, not defense, sorry, I meant kicker. The running back in Mixon, I think, benefits because obviously Houston's going to want to take control of this game and they actually do want to win this one. So I think that could be an undervalued one. As for Kansas City, I have no idea what's about to happen. Is Mahomes going to play the full game? Maybe. If he limps at all, is he probably going to get sat right away? Possibly. So I think your matchup wouldn't shock me if you're right now doing some thinking about heading into the weekend. It wouldn't surprise me if this doesn't end up being your full matchup, but I think one of the biggest things that does break your way, Gibbs is in an empty backfield, meaning he should get a bit more love against Chicago, and you should benefit from that. Ben, on your side, it's funny. You've got that receiver depth. You've got the kind of underground heroes. One of the biggest things I'm curious about, what is your obsession with Justin Tucker? He has had a horrible year, dude, but you're just dancing with who brung you. You got a kicker who's outscored him. But Yahoo doesn't think he's going to, and you obviously believe, so don't listen to me, because if you make the change, it's definitely going to be the wrong one. Maybe. I don't know. That's the most I've ever thought about a kicker in fantasy football, so that's how you know I think this is actually going to come down to a few key matchups. I don't believe necessarily in this amount of gap between you, but like I said, anything in Yahoo is possible, so let's see how it goes. I was waiting as long as I could for this, and now I'm kind of in that point of, does maybe we just don't tell Mark? I know he knows, I know he makes changes, but he hasn't done it yet. And if we look on his bench, there's a couple key players I fully expect to be here, and I expect this matchup to be about 50-50, or actually if you look at it, Mark might end up having a slight advantage, but that to me is a 50-50. This is definitely going to be to who shows up. I don't know if I love all of his matchups. I never love the Chase matchup, but against Cincinnati or Cleveland, he always seems to stick it to them, so I'm super worried about that. Jonnu Smith has been on a tear the last 4 or 5 weeks, definitely being a top 5 tight end in that stretch. So whether he ends up in the whole season is yet to come, but it doesn't matter. If they're playing hot, then he's playing hot right now. I do think you have some decisions to make for wide receiver, and certainly for running back, you've got a couple things that you could do. So I'm just going to go ahead and assume that you haven't completely thought this one through yet, but you will. On my side, I've got a couple big horses. I'm really hoping I didn't just use all of my luck last week, although on the plus side, I did have receivers massively underperform, or at least relatively underperform, so I'm going to need them to bounce back. But if I could have the running back and tight end performances again, I would take it. I don't know if I get 2 weeks in a row of that, though. Well, this week is the last one that everyone's going to play. We got our seeding matchup for our 5-6, and then they will be finished, and we'll have our consolation championship semifinals. So here's hoping the best for everybody. I do think it's worth paying attention to. You've got Thursday night game as per usual. You got some Saturday games to pay attention to, and then your regular Sunday, Monday before we get to the craziness of next week. But let's not even address that. We've got our semifinal matchup in the playoffs, round 2, moving into our finals next week. So first we got to decide who's going to be there. I would say good luck to all, but you know I don't mean it for everybody, but I'm in Canada, so I'm supposed to be nice, so I will say it, but you know. Anyway, good luck.